Daniher drives it right through the middle, and that is the start they were after.
3 quick goals for the Brisbane Lions, and that's the first for Zach Bailey.
Hipwood strikes it nicely as Brisbane unleashes a burst to be reckoned with. 5 in a row. Joe says, how about 5? How about a glorious 5?
Goal number 6 for Joe. Coming up, he beats it. He's got it.
Rayner gives them one last moment to enjoy. The Lions to second on the table, emerging again.
Bake them away, toys.
6 wins on the trot, a healthy percentage, and up to 3rd on the ladder. The Lions just keep on keeping on. It is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with JB and Patrick back at it again for another week after round 9 against Essendon. A very frustrating, at least a first half of a game on Saturday night, but we got the win in the end. A healthy little 7-goal win. Another good week.
Yeah, not too bad this week. I definitely think I'd feel a little bit more, just generally a bit. There was a lot of frustration in the first half of that game, both in the broadcast sense and on the field. Definitely happy that Rayner sank that goal right at the end, just to make it a nice 40-plus win. So
I must admit, it didn't feel like a 40-plus win in the end. By the time that the final siren went, I was really hung up on that first half, which was excruciatingly low scoring, some uncharacteristic misses from a lot of people. Hipwood, Charlie, Bailey, Daniher missed one, although he obviously made up for that. Just couldn't really buy a goal. And then in that second quarter, Essendon put on 2 or 3 in a row, and it really just, I don't know, just took the shine off it a little bit. I always had faith that we were going to pull through, and we did in the end, but yeah, a bit of a messy game.
I got to say, after a point where I think they brought up that Essendon hadn't been kept goalless in a quarter since, I think, round 1 of 2015. Needless to say, my petty brain was pretty ticked off in the 3rd and 4th quarters. Particularly the 3rd quarter. I don't know if Grant Birchall is looking a bit worse for wear or not, but there seemed to be, firstly, a massive chop of the arms on Hipwood, followed by a runner just running through the middle of the field en route to their 1 goal of that quarter. And then 4th quarter, Tip and Woody out the back, moving like a freight train. So, yeah, first half, almost the less said the better, but thank goodness that we were well and truly in the game. I think it was just a matter of like pulling our heads in and giving it a go. No place better to start than the former Essendonian,
Big Joe.
the Joe Daniher.
Yeah, and even Conor McKenna had quite a good game against his former club as well.
He was itching to get on the score sheet.
He was
absolutely frothing for it and couldn't quite get there. He had a couple of speculative shots that fell short. One, I think, slipped across the face, but he was frothing for it. And yeah, fair enough. I would be too if I'd played anything.
100%. And as you touched on, Joe, I mean, what can we say? That hasn't already been said about him in the last couple of days. 6 goals, especially in the first half. He was our only goal kicker. He kicked our first 4 goals that kept us in the contest. Eventually, other people chimed in and added to the score sheet. But one of his better games, he's had a good stretch, 5-6 weeks since he was blasted for that game against the Bulldogs. But he's had a good stretch since then. And not only was his goal kicking on this week, I think the way he attacked every single contest was fantastic.
You like the fact that he sort of was pretty nonchalant about his sort of celebrations. He's sort of like, yeah, fair enough. It was almost the old Mario Balotelli, I won't celebrate scoring a goal because I'm like a postman mailing letters. It's my job, so I'm not going to provide too much of it. Was it a bit of that in Daniher? I'm not going to celebrate because it's my job.
Yeah, potentially. And I'm not going to celebrate because I'm Joe Daniher, and that's just genuinely who I am as a human being. So there's probably a little bit of that in it as well. I don't think he's the sort of bloke that's going to go over the top playing against his old club. The Essendon fans, that there were plenty of them at the Gabba. They were giving it to him every time he got the ball, but equally the Lions fans got behind him every time especially in that last 2 minutes where he got off the bench and he was just picking up junk possessions. He was receiving a mighty applause every time he touched the ball.
Yeah, and you can't blame them for doing that. Essendon fans get into it. It's almost pretty, I guess, sneaky funny that we said a couple of weeks ago when he was back in the ruck that he probably played his second best game for the club, the other one being against the Bombers in his first season for the Lions, and this was probably up there in his top 3 games. So poor old Essendon, they've seen him work the entire way of the ground twice and sort of now hit the score sheet in a tangible sense. Yeah, some really, really missed gettable efforts in the first quarter. Charlie Cameron from directly in front, 25 metres out. Yeah, don't want to see that, hey.
No, that was very uncharacteristic, and he's had a fantastic stretch as well. He's playing career best form the last, 5-6 weeks. So he was, I guess, due for a quieter week, and this one came, but all the credit goes to Andy McGrath there. He played Charlie Cameron as well as anyone ever has, probably since Dylan Grimes back in those finals a couple of years ago. And as it was mentioned in our Discord, some credit goes to Chuck there as well for persevering and keep presenting, because, as years gone by, he would have hung his head and the body language would have dropped and he would have just packed up shop. So, no, Andy McGrath had a fantastic game.
Yeah, I think Essendon set up pretty well to kind of trap us into that kick over the top. They gave just enough space to tempt the kick, but I think we all agree that, I think you said he ran out of Gabba quite a few times, Charlie, just over the boundary line. And I think there were a couple, maybe one into Bailey, that just sort of the bounce didn't quite go right and sort of went through for a behind or whatever. But yeah, they provided a little bit of enticement for that kick over the top for the chase. And they did it really well, Essendon, I got to say. Not quite their sort of free-flowing, exciting football that I had heard of or heard from others. But yeah, some good system in there. And maybe they sort of thought they might have a bit of difficulty playing against our sort of pretty hot form back line. Moving the ball quickly might have been a bit more difficult. So maybe they thought to try and tighten it up and tighten the contest might have been a better route to a result. Thankfully, it didn't work. But yeah, interesting on Essendon. Not sold, but also not unimpressed.
No, I thought they were. We are the better team, and that obviously came through in the end. But I thought for good portions of that match, as they played the better footy, and you can tell they structured their whole game on taking away our game rather than, a lot of teams out there like, we're going to trust our system to beat the other system. You can tell Brad Scott was like, no, we're going to try and stop Brisbane doing what they do well, and they did for big portions of that game as well. Like last week against Carlton, where we just trapped it in that front half so often. More often than not, Essendon from a kick in would go a short option first and then the big kick out, 60, 70 metres to try and clear that wall and stop it coming in so often. So I thought they pulled a number of levers to try and stop us playing our best footy as well. I think Jack Payne was not as prolific as he was last week. Harris was good as well, but, same story. I think Froggy was probably our best defender. He had a great game. And through periods, they had someone run with Chocky. I thought Essendon did a lot of things right, but obviously just didn't get the result in the end.
Yeah, I think it's hard to look at the defence and go, they didn't play very well when it was, I think, by a long... Well, not that you said that, but that they had sort of quieter games. I think there was just a few less sort of bombs in. I think Payne ended up still with the most intercept marks defensively, so that does well for his standing within that metric that you touched on last week. I thought Leicester was really good. A couple of hairy moments early on. There was a weird holding the ball kind of glitch in the matrix that happened, but his transition of the ball was really impressive, and his ability to kind of provide overlap, extra run through the midfield was really cool. Something that I guess you don't really expect from your third tall. But yeah, Payne was always there to get in the way of things, and it was just it seemed like the team realised that it wasn't quite our night, so they just, similar to Essendon, just tightened up and said, well, we're not going to let you score.
It was a real arm wrestle, a real dour affair for especially the first half. A complete opposite to last week. The two Saturday night games were Melbourne pantsing North and that was a couple of weeks ago. Melbourne pantsing North and Carlton doing a number on the Eagles. This week, the two Saturday night games were the Bulldogs and Carlton, which was even more, low scoring than the game we were watching. And I would imagine as a neutral trying to watch either of those games of footy, you'd either be enthralled at the arm wrestle contest or you'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't be dealing with this.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a point at halftime I was like, geez, in the last 5 quarters, Carlton have kicked... of 4 of the last 5 quarters, so the middle 2 against us and the first 2 against the Bulldogs, they kicked a total of 2 goals.
Yeah.
So, and I think with us, it was almost factoring in those two. We'd only, take the last two games. There's been a full game's worth of football where we've only conceded 3 goals, which is impressive for a long stretch. The middle half last week and the second half this week. I think we were probably a little bit fortuitous with some of the outs and people missing for the Bombers this week. Parrish was an out that I don't think either of us were expecting. Full context, we did do a preview on Essendon last week, and I butchered virtually every player name that came to mind. And I spent time talking about a bloke that didn't exist and a guy that had retired about 3 years ago. So I'd well and truly Carl Pilkington filmed it by way of talking about Liam Shields and Devon Smith. But no Cox, no Ridley out with concussion, and no Parrish.
That makes
probably
a difference.
helped us quite a bit, I think.
Considering their back six was, they battled all night. Every time that ball went in, they just scrapped and they saved a lot of goals. It was a real mess in that forward 50 for us, especially in the first half. Eventually, the game opened up a little bit. We managed to get some goals on the board, but yeah, geez, it was hard work.
I think as a team, they'll probably look at a lot of things they could have done a lot better in that. Thankfully for us, we've got the ability to sort of just move on from it and try not to think about it and go, well, it's 4 points we didn't pick up last season that we picked up this season. Puts us into a pretty feisty situation for the QClash or the Pineapple Grapple next week, with them having played a training game against West Coast. I don't know, is that even real? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, West Coast are just a nightmare situation at the moment. I do feel sorry for them and their supporters at the moment, because they're in for it for the foreseeable future, and they've come away with more injuries from that game. I can't fathom how each and every week they come away with at least one, if not 2 or 3 injuries per game. And Jack Darling's fractured his arm, so it's not just a hamstring tweak or something like that. These are big injuries.
Have they taken them off of they've given them Zimmel instead of full calcium milk or something? What the hell is going on?
I don't know if it's something going over there in Optus, or if they need to review their strength and conditioning staff, or what the go is. But yeah, it's not fun for them over there, and I don't envy any West Coast supporters at the moment. But having said that, I can't wait to play them.
Yeah, well, I think looking at some of the elements of fixtures, we don't play. We don't play Hawthorn, West Coast, or North Melbourne twice this year, I don't believe.
No, and that's fine.
It's interesting because looking at the teams that do, I think, get 2 of them, or they're sort of in that race from about 6th through to 10th.
Yeah,
10th or 11th. So I mean, I think we play Collingwood twice, we play Melbourne twice. I don't really remember the other ones, but
I think Saints, Adelaide, Gold Coast, we always play twice. And I think potentially even Essendon again, maybe, question mark. Have to double check that.
Either way, it's almost like I feel positive having to play these good teams again, because it's almost the ability to make up points that you ordinarily wouldn't. Because, let's say you're playing West Coast a second time and Collingwood are playing someone else for a second time, rather than, you're relying on one to drop points and the other one to pick up if you want it. But if you're playing them head to head, then
yeah.
I mean, I think it's better. Well, you want to play the good teams anyway. Who wants to watch us play West Coast twice when you can watch us play Collingwood twice, I guess?
Well, to be fair, at the start of the season, when I saw we lined up against St Kilda and Adelaide twice, I did think to myself, yeah, those are probably nice teams to play twice, get a couple of easy points, but that's certainly not the case as the season's unfolded. We've had the luxury of always being able to play Gold Coast twice, which we will win that game. Next week's going to be a little bit tougher, but I still expect us to walk away with a win there.
I admit I did look at just had a bit of a peek at the West Coast, Gold Coast sort of stats just to see, Tom Berry playing. And I just ranked the stats by tackles inside forward 50, and there he was, top of the pops, 4.
Beauty. And that's what you want to say.
Yeah, good for him. Not next week, but good for him. And it also seemed like they might have a bit of stick going to Matt Rowell, the grass eater, just in terms of him disproportionately working inside mid. And they seem to he got a lot more possessions and a smaller ratio of contested possessions kicked to goal. So maybe that answers a few critics and might be something for us to think about in terms of maybe even a run with role of someone that can work in and outside. So it could be interesting. I don't think their midfield is particularly deep, but they've got some good players there. So
yeah, especially with Tuke Mellor out for the moment as well, who's historically been very much up for the fight when it comes to playing the Lions. But we are getting ahead. We haven't really finished, this Essendon game. We, as we always do each and every week, we get 15 minutes into the podcast and go, oh, let's go back to the start of the game and the changes. In comes Zorko off a 1 week hamstring injury, which he tends to do. He seems to bounce back from hamstrings so quickly. Ainsworth, the person to go out rather than Sharp, which was a little bit of a surprise, but I thought Sharpie was much better this week than he was last week.
Yeah, I got to say I kind of did not call it, but in terms of what you're going to get with Ainsworth and Pryor.
Yep.
In terms of replacements, whereas Harry Sharp still is learning the game, and Wilmot's sort of almost been playing more of half back, which is his natural how he was drafted. So I can definitely see the value in playing Harry Sharp for an extended run of games. And yeah, I do agree he was much more impactful. It's good to see him stretch his quick legs.
Yeah.
And it was also nice to have a sub that came on and looked the correct pace for the game.
Well, we will get to JL a little bit later on in the show when we cover the twos because he's had a blinder. Last week on the show you said, do you ever find yourself sitting there going, we need Daniel Rich? I found myself in that first half of that game going, I wouldn't mind Daniel Rich right now, especially when we were fumbling, falling over, and credit to Essendon. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, but a lot of that was due to the position that Essendon was putting us in to make those mistakes. But I thought, you know what, some clean ball use from a nice half back would be all right about now.
But also remember that isn't a time when we're playing particularly poorly. So that was my caveat to that statement. So I think we're both right there. We'll call it a 0-0 draw and move on. I mean, the game, it opened up after half time. I think we were all waiting for it to open up.
Yep.
We touched on it before. Daniher has 6 goals. Bailey with 2. And then I think it was Rayner, Big O, Link, McCarthy and Hipwood all chipped in with a goal each to, I think, bring us to 12 goals by the end of it, which is fine, And just a word on Bailey regarding this week and last week. A lot of chatter earlier on in the season, a lot of frustration even coming from us. But last week particularly, we didn't even mention him, which is probably a bit poor on our behalf. But that's sort of why he doesn't get dropped.
Yeah.
The performance last week, 4 goals, 2 goals, 6 in 2 games. Pretty handy return for someone who was pretty wildly out of form at the beginning of the season. So
yeah, he's working his way into the season nicely. I guess, we lightly touched on last week, but 4 goals, but 2 or 3 of them were a little out the back jobs. So how much credence do you put in? I mean, there's still goals on the board, and he's improving. So there was 3 players at the start of the year that I put on notice: McCarthy, Bailey, and McCluggage. They've all pulled their socks up over the last 4-week stretch.
I think as much as anything, I think he had 3 set shots in the last, 2 last night and 1, and they were shots that he was missing at the beginning of the year. So that's probably as much a steadier for me, for my view of it.
If you've got a mate that loves the Lions, tell them to get the podcast into their ear holes.
Big O. He went up against a very highly touted, highly potentialed, highly mulleted ruckman in the Don Draper, who I believe he made his debut against us. It might have been him versus Connor Ballenden as a battle of the debuts.
That's right. I do remember that.
And look how far one's come. Always thought there was a bit of value in Connor Ballenden, but wouldn't know where he is now. Maybe one for later on in the show. I thought against a pretty highly touted ruckman, Big O again shows his value in I'd say a defensive style ruck.
Yeah.
Although he hit the score sheet, he was great. He was really good.
Yeah, he's having his best season by a long way this year so far. He's been very consistent, and when he did sort of go down in the middle of the ground, grabbing his, I guess it was hip or ribs or something that Draper got in with the knee there, I thought to myself, God, that he's going to be tough to replace. If he does go down, he's going to be very tough to replace.
I think with Big O is his role's been like much more concisely defined to him, where I mentioned last week he was almost sort of dropping off and sweeping, and that was made really clear on the broadcast, where he was basically dropping in on one of the Essendon talls, didn't bother learning either of their names, to allow Payne or Harris to roam free. So rather than him running forward, a la like sort of Gorn kind of provided the blueprint to be able to do that forward and back, but he's dropping in back to allow space for our forwards, and it was kind of made pretty abundantly clear how it was working and what they were doing. So there was a little bit of self-satisfaction in that, given it was something I picked up the week before or the weeks leading into it. But he's been great. I think there was a bit of frustration a couple of weeks ago when he was singled out on first crack for kind of hoofing the ball forward by David King. I think we'd had quite a commanding win over someone, and they brought out him doing his big sort of volleyball serves out of the congestion. Right. And they showed him kind of out of order. It ticks me off. I made a note to mention it, but I think we'd done the podcast before then. 2 of them that they showed literally resulted in goals, but they just cut off the footage. And so I think it was something that we had both said, we love this. We love his ability to Clark Keating the ball forward, and that was brought up as a negative, and you don't want that stuff to bleed through, but so we like it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, especially I think just his ability to realise as the game goes on that he knows, how he's matching up on a particular ruckman and where he's got them beat, whether it be physically, aerially, whatever, and he can use that to his advantage. So he knows when he's got a ruckman beat for size and strength, and then he will grab it out of the ruck or he will just punch it forward. Like he's got that nous about him now to figure it out on the fly and use it in game.
Do you think there's anything doing with that knee? I know it got brought up on the Reddit, and a lot of people sort of said, "Nuts, Ruckcraft, da-da-da-da." Lacking a little bit of context that Draper did get utterly a fool made out of him about 30 seconds before by Daniher taking one out of the ruck. I have a sneaky feeling he was out to try and kind of rectify his own mistake there.
Yeah, very possibly.
I don't think it'll get cited, but I think it's kind of one of the nastier ones. Yeah. It's not just a ruck contest. That's someone looking to make a statement after they've been made a fool of.
He might get a fine.
Yeah, I guess the difference is he was jumping at the ball. I thought the bouncing of the ball was pretty poor, but...
Ugh, don't even. Speaking of unsightly and garish things, Chucky Neal sporting a little bit of fresh ink for the game, which is a bit of a weird one to just get a tattoo, post round 8.
Yeah, I spent a bit of time wondering, has he had his shoulder strapped the whole year, and that's the first time it's been
Actually,
seen?
now that you mention it, yeah, he did have it strapped last week.
Because I certainly wouldn't... I didn't even like going to, band practice or training if I'd had any work done. I haven't had much work done, but certainly wasn't two little birds.
Yeah, a strange one, and I don't know why. It's just... Maybe because it's the first of potentially many, or maybe that's where he's leaving it. Maybe it's the fact that he lives in Queensland and has not got a single bit of tan like myself here, and he just seems like such a clean-skinned sort of a fella that it just sticks out like dog's balls. But there was something just odd about it.
Yeah, I noticed it when he was running to do the toss, and I thought it was a bit of when you pull tape off your arm and it leaves that kind of residue, and then you somehow end up in mud.
Yep.
Like we all do, and it gets a bit of mud on the... I thought it was that, and then it was sort of it's not that the tattoo itself is bad. It might be, but I don't think that. It's just the context of it being next to nothing doesn't make a lick of sense to me. If it ends up being a full mental sleeve or something like that, fair enough. He doesn't seem like the bloke, so that's a bit where there's some cognitive dissonance there for me. But I've got 4 tattoos on my arm, and I can stand still and you can't see them. They're all on kind of the backside, so I don't know, the front of your shoulder is just a bit weird.
Yeah, there was just something odd about it, and I can't really articulate what it was, and I don't think anyone can, but I think everyone just sort of went, why am I cringing at this? But I know that I am.
I think I'd feel the same way if McCluggage got some sort of... I feel like it'd be my son had gotten something done. I'd be like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
Imagine if next week McCluggage rocks in with some sort of Southern Cross tattoo.
The Dane Beam special.
Yeah, I don't see that one happening just yet.
Yeah, because I mean, for some, like Rayner's got a bit of work done, and you barely notice it.
Yeah.
For some people, it just works, and I don't think it really works for Lachie Neale's aesthetic. As kind of, maybe he's trying to tangibly get a bit of mongrel, and he needs to be stabbed by a needle dozens and dozens of times.
Maybe. Hey, he had a great game, so whatever. At the end of the day, whatever. Had a fantastic game. Plenty of the ball, got the ball moving forward a lot, helped out in defense. You know, it wasn't Josh Dunkley levels of complete last week, but it was as good a footy game as he's played in this year.
Yeah, I mean, it'll factor in a little bit later on. I thought Ashcroft was really good in the first. He was good when the game was kind of garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in amongst it in the first half, kind of keeping us sort of in it in terms of the contest. He dropped off a bit in the second half, which is fine.
Picked up a lot of junk in the second half.
Yeah. When you win a game by 40 points, it's kind of like, yeah, a lot of people didn't really do much, but you still won the game. Yeah. So it's hard to sort of, hyper-analyze what was going on. I think a lot of people were far below par. As you said before, Essendon seemingly were going into that game trying to take our game away. But certainly if that was the case, and there were so many people that were below par to win by, almost double their score, was, fair enough,
One thing I have noticed over the last couple of home games, and it stood out like dog's balls against Fremantle, probably because of where we're at as, respective clubs. The quarter time and 3/4 time huddles, it takes a long time for our coaching staff to get down there. That game against Fremantle, the first quarter break, they had 15 coaching staff rush out to the huddle. Longmuir and all their senior assistant coaches. Fags just sort of wanders down there at his own pace with Danny Daly and stuff, and it's largely player-driven for the first 5-minute chat by the time the coaches get there. I think that's a really good sign that, a lot of the handover has been given to the team. And it was the same again this week with the Bobbers coaching staff and ours. A lot of it was player-driven for us before the coaches got there.
Do you think was there anyone coming off the bench, like even Birchall or anyone that is on the bench that was leading it, or was it just the players?
I mean, I think it's largely player-driven, which is a fantastic sign for where we're at.
Yeah, that's kind of, there's a level of, I guess, incredulity to it. Because you would imagine they might go, all right, it's Chris Fagan here. Just take the boys through and tell them this and we'll be down in 5 minutes. Like that. But maybe not.
I think it's just a good sign that there is that, and I hate the cliche that a lot of clubs use this, there's a complete buy-in, and the message has been fairly consistent that, the players can deliver it and get it flowing throughout the group, that everyone knows that they're on the same page and knows their roles and what needs to happen and what should be happening, that by the time the coaches do get down there, they're just there to reinforce the message, make some sort of, strategical swaps, flip the magnets a little bit, but largely just say, yep, you guys know what you're doing, go and do it.
That's a good point. I certainly hadn't noticed that. I hadn't looked for it.
It's probably not, it's not something that I guess is on broadcast, but it's definitely something I noticed against Fremantle because they had a lot of coaching staff rush out to that huddle, whereas we just had no one. And everyone
probably just needed, at the time, Fremantle probably needed one person to go man on man with everybody to tell them to handball the ball as much as possible.
Very possibly.
I don't know. I definitely think that too many cooks can spoil the football broth.
Yeah.
What were conditions like at the game? It seemed to be that weird, slippy, greasy kind of Gabba thing, but I don't know if it was.
No, yeah, it did have that feel to it, but it wasn't that bad. It was a little bit cool. There was a bit of a breeze. The weather had been sort of up and down. There was a bit of rain in the morning, but for the back half of the day, it was pretty all right. The sun was out a little bit, so there would have been a little bit of dew around, but we certainly made it look a lot worse than it was in reality.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I mean, not too much else to say on the game, really. Like, we got the job done. Didn't hurt our percentage at all. Like, we moved up to third on the ladder.
I mean, one thing, and to Essendon's credit as well, they're the first team in 5 weeks to keep us below 100 points, 6 weeks to keep us below 100 points. So, mark that down as a whatever sort of win you want if you're an Essendon fan, that they did a fairly good defensive job on us as, one of the more attacking and highly offensive teams. So, right direction if you're a Bombers fan, that you can if you want to take away little wins from a game like that, then you can.
Yeah, I think we spoke before, or in maybe an earlier iteration, just with Essendon and St Kilda kind of overachieving in the first third of the season. We saw Adelaide beat St Kilda, albeit in Adelaide. So today, so there could be an element of just a little bit of drop off from these teams, which is understandable. Like, I'm not saying that they're bad teams or they're going to be awful forever, but just we know that you can only kind of maintain a certain standard for a certain amount of time, particularly when you've got new coaching and you're moving forward. But I think finals might be a goal for the Saints. Might be a bit of a stretch for Essendon, but I wouldn't be surprised if you find both of them outside the 8 by the end of the season.
Oh, I think the Saints have banked enough wins to begin with that it's going to be harder for them to miss, but anything can happen. You don't know what's going on. Richmond could make a mad dash.
Six wins for the Saints.
Yeah,
that's pretty handy. Yeah, what were they last year though? I think they were similar.
Yeah, it's true actually.
I must admit I forgot Richmond did a number on Geelong on Friday night. So that opens things up a little bit, provides a bit of breathing room. I think it's largely good for the competition because it sort of just reminds everybody that Geelong are beatable, and it also provides a level of expectation for Richmond fans, which are then going to be dashed hilariously at some point in time. So I'm all for Richmond fans being sad.
Oh yeah, aren't we all?
And when they're happier for longer, the sadness is really, 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 really there. So I'm looking forward to it.
Get in touch anytime. Shoot us an email at blfancast@gmail.com or join the Discord.
All right, well, let's get to some votes. And I think for this week in particular, for the first time in a couple of weeks, it's not as cut and dry. I did toy through a few players, but I did land on Joe the 3, Lockie the 2, and Frog the 1. But I very could have easily given that one to Andy McGrath.
Yeah, well, we all know about me and who I vote for. I thought about giving Mr. Lopsided Jaw a vote, but I didn't. I also thought about giving Frog a vote, and I was going to actually see if you did, because I knew you would. If you hadn't, I would have.
Yeah.
So I went down to her 3, Neil, 2 lovely, lovely votes to match his 2 lovely birds. And I gave Big O my 1 because he deserves it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he took my 1 last week or the week before as well for probably similar reasons. But I thought that's as good a game from Frog in a long time. I mean, granted, he hasn't been playing seniors regularly in a long time, but especially in that first half, he was one of the definite best on keeping us in the game with Joe. That defensive pressure, his attack on the ball. Yeah, you mentioned that little glitch in the matrix where him and Zorko sort of just tripped over each other and got pinged.
I think they must have forgotten that they were playing in the 2023 iteration of the team, and they thought they were playing in about 2014 and completely freaked.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? We're going to give the ball to Todd Banfield.
That was a fantastic game from Froggy. Really good to see. Just good feels with that.
Yeah, it's always quite nice. Yeah, I definitely had him next to O, and I was just going to wait and see what you did. So
nice.
A reactionary vote.
That does lead into one of a couple of questions we've got. This one comes from Loz on Twitter. With Diz playing his second game in the VFL, how do we fit him back in the team with Frog playing so well? Did we miss Dizzy so much only because we thought his only replacement was Joyce? Is he truly a best 22?
Ooh.
Lot to unpack there. A quick answer from me is yes, I think he is truly best 22, but you can't drop Frog on that.
Yeah, he's best 22 in my opinion, but the best 22 on paper doesn't always necessarily work as your best 22. Case in point, last week Zorko was out, Answorth was in, and I think the team played a better game last week. So you have a stronger 22 come in for this game, and they play a less cohesive game. The paper doesn't always work, but yeah, no, I would err on the side of caution with Gardner's injuries.
Yes.
Just because you don't need to. Like, that's the luxury of having a situation where you've got now you've got Lester and you've got Joyce that can fill that role if it needs to. You don't need to rush him back and be like, okay, well, is his elbow going to crack in half when he goes up for a mark? Because that's not what we want. We don't want to see bits of viscera and bone coming out of the Gabba. So error on the side of caution. Let him get a bit of run in his legs. How long has he not played for? Like, oh, it'd been prelim last year, eh?
Yes.
So, and did he immediately have surgery after that? And then
I think so. I don't know if it was immediate or if it sort of happened down the line and then it flared up or something else happened. It just, as happens with Darcy, things happen. A little niggle here turns into a 2-3 weeker. Complications. His body ain't what it used to be.
Well, I don't think his body was ever particularly great anyway. But
No, you're probably
I think
right.
the issue with Gardner is that I think he's one more shoulder away from retirement. And I know that might be a bit harsh, but I think the level of surgeries and the experimental surgery I think he had the season before last, it definitely feels like if his shoulder goes again, that'd probably be curtains, and it would be understandable too.
Yeah.
So definitely err on the side of caution. I agree with you. You can't probably. You're not going to drop Leicester. I think they're going to not be chopping and changing unless they have to leading into the bye. Just playing people into form. There are still people that are a little bit out of form. You're not quite getting the output that we're sort of used to from sort of McCluggage. Everyone seemed a little bit down on their output, and that doesn't mean that they go. Doesn't mean they get omitted or dropped. So Gardner, earn your stripes.
Yeah, as you said, it's a luxury, and while if Rob plays like that every week, it's going to be hard to drop him. So contest for spots. There's 3 vying for one position there. If you throw Joyce into that mix as well, who will probably find himself down the pecking order a little bit, but it's good to have that depth for sure. We had another question from Lucas also on Twitter: is how is Noz not in our best 22 and Sharp is? And this flow on from things we discussed last week is, have we conceded that Dev, Rob and Pryor are West Coast bound and that's why we aren't playing them? I think we did touch on that last week, and I think it's a definite option for them. I think the offers will come from West Coast teams, Freo and West Coast, but as you said, if they've got the maturity behind them to go to the coaching staff and say, hey, look, what's the plan with Zorko and Rich? Is there a spot for us or them, or vice versa, or whatever? Whether that happens or not, whether they see a pay increase and guaranteed game time, and that's all that they require. But Noz getting dropped and keeping Sharp in is a little bit strange, I must admit. But yeah, if we're giving games to Sharp because we need him to have a stretch and see how he fits into the team on a more semi-permanent basis, then it does make a little bit of sense.
I think one of the things with running wingers, so look at Langdon and Ollie Hollands.
Yep.
Brody Holland.
Now there's a throwback.
Off to the tribunal with you, sir. Brody Holland. It's one of the greatest commentary moments of all time. With those running wingers, it kind of takes a bit of time for them to sort of learn the role and get used to it, because you sort of expect, they can just run and they'll make do with it. But a lot of the time, coming from that running background, the learning the game smarts around that can take a bit more time. I certainly, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that Langdon from Melbourne.
Yep.
I'm not sure Langdon was a great winger until he was a great winger.
Yeah.
I think he was sort of a bit like, okay, there he is. And then he completely blitzed the competition.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
So maybe whether they're looking at Sharp to do something like that, I talked about it last week. Like, I think it's worth giving him a stretch of games until the bye and just seeing how it goes.
Yeah, and I think especially someone like Fags, who has come from a club like Hawthorn, where they have had Isaac Smith, who he has identified in the past as, he was Hawthorn's most influential player in setting up play that you just didn't recognise. Brad Hill as well, in his time there, he probably didn't really hit that until he went to Freo, and he's probably gone to another level at St Kilda as well. So I think he knows the value of those hard running wingers, and I think if he can see that in Harry Sharp, it's going to be a long-term project, but he's willing to put it in.
I don't think we necessarily see Answorth as a winger either.
No, he's
sort of someone that sits more, whether it's halfback or through the midfield or that sort of thing. That's more where I see him. I think he's been unlucky to a degree that Starcevic came along when he did, which was in a season when Answorth was struggling with his, I think his groin issues.
Yep.
So it was almost he was one in, one out. and then Starcevic became one of the best lockdown defenders in the competition. So it just kind of shows that injury at the wrong time can really stifle a development in a team. But yeah, I don't think it's as cut and dry. It's interesting, similar answers to both of those questions, that it's like, just because it's on paper best 22 doesn't mean that it works. I'm definitely in favor of playing the best players in the position that they're playing, rather than playing all of your best players and modifying where they can play.
We had another question from Matt Hudson, who has been a regular contributor when it comes to question time here on the Brisbane Lions Fancast.
Hutto?
Yeah.
It's not like Matt Hutto, brother of Ben Hudson.
Or Anthony Hudson, perhaps.
Oh,
small man with a giant head. Can we discuss the change in roles of this year's mids compared to last year, in particular Bez? Now, I don't exactly know what the specifics Matt Hudson's got in his brain when he asked that, but I'm assuming with the addition of Dunks and Ashcroft taking more inside time, and I guess historically using Bez as that cooler / lockdown midfielder when we've needed him. Against that game against Clayton Oliver, we used him on Zach Merritt last year as well. He still plays his portion of game in the middle, but his inside mid time is dropped, and he's playing more your wing role. Who he has been a prolific runner for many years at the club. You look at the time trials every year, and he's always top 3.
I don't think I've ever looked at the time trial numbers, to be perfectly honest, but I didn't know they released them.
No, I think they just do a little bit of a synopsis after, the preseason, and you're starved for any sort of footy content. You're like, gimme. And it's always the same names,
it's like
busting out the time trials.
Old mate ran this amount in this amount of time. I got to say, like, it's Mother's Day as it is. I spent a bit of time on the phone with my mum early on today, and she said she listens every week. And she said, I find it funny the amount of things you have a lot of knowledge about, and then there's just some things you just nothing. You don't focus on other teams' players. You don't. And I sort of like, well, be that my trial by fire kind of character, but there you go. It's not intentional. There's just some things I don't care about. So, did you see him on 360 on Thursday, Barry?
No, I don't go out of my way to watch 360 on a Thursday.
Not a fan of the Kath Loughnan and Brereton combo?
No, I like Kath Loughnan. I don't know. It's just not Jared and Robbo in the same formula. And I don't know. It just hasn't really... I just want footy to be on Thursday night. So it's me just being a little bit grumpy. Like, meh. But I did see he was
too
on.
Much. Obviously he's an ambassador for the Breast Cancer Foundation and stuff, owing to his mum. So it was a bit on that, I think, with Mother's Day coming up. It was a bit odd that they also had some of the big freeze stuff happening at the same time. So bit over charitied. I mean, I guess you can never have too much charity, but sometimes when you sort of like, there wasn't a great deal said to him about his football. I think Dermot just sort of asked, with Dunkley coming in, what's it been like? And he sort of said, he's sort of taken my spot a little bit, and I'm just trying to work hard, but I'm playing out on the wing, so I'm still getting games and still trying to impact, and when I have to go in there, I do what I can. So he's very, like, not flowery about how he sort of says it. He's just, I think he would admit it, and I think he did, might be wrong, that he would want to be playing in the inside mid position. But he's not. And, I think he's a good different sort of tagger if we need him. So the ability to have two, because he hasn't tagged that much. He tagged, obviously, Oliver and Zach Merritt, as you said. He also used to do a few jobs on Selwood in his early career.
Yeah, and then
I think that was as much a learning
yeah,
curve.
I think that was an education process more than anything. It's like, hey, follow around Joel Selwood, look how he plays football, and if you can take away, 10%, bloody, that's a win.
But I'd look at it and go, a lot of criticism for some of the teams is that their midfield, maybe their starting midfield three is great. So look at Gold Coast and look at Rowell and
Anderson and Miller, yeah.
Anderson and like Took Miller's out, but the starting mids are great, and then there's a drop off. I don't think that's something you can really say about us. No,
and it's always interesting to see who our starting three is in the middle, because, you know, sometimes it's Bailey, sometimes I think it was Rayner that headed to the middle. It might not have been first bounce, but maybe after halftime or something, he was right in there. Sometimes it's Huey. Sometimes it is Bez in there, but it's generally Chucky and Dunks, and then take your pick.
Do you reckon they like just roll some dice?
Maybe.
What? Imagine if that was your method, though. You just like, okay, everyone roll dice, and whoever gets the highest roll goes in, so that there's no possible system to it. Like, how can the opposition know what we're going to do if it's ours is done by random chance? Like, I think I've gone insane.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being the official process, but as always, it's a good problem to have when we've got that many midfielders that we don't know ourselves, and it's almost like a little unwrapping a Christmas present at the start of every game. Oh, who's it going to be this time?
Every centre bounce is a new Christmas. Yeah, so I guess I don't even really remember what Hutto's question was.
Just the change of roles in the midfielders, and I think, he touched on
I'd argue that his role hasn't really changed since last year.
I think he's just gone. He did spend a little bit more time inside last year, and he's been pushed back to the outside this year. And I don't necessarily think that's
possibly.
a bad thing.
I think possibly. Like, I think recency bias in the back end of last season, and particularly in the two finals. You'd have to say when JL wasn't in the team, he was. But when JL was in the team, that's where Dunk's playing. So maybe there is, but I'd say he was playing a lot more on the wing last year than the year before. So I don't think there's as much of a change as there might be thought there was. Words. I got him.
Make sure you follow us on socials. Just search for BL Fancast.
Well, let's have a chat about your mate JL, as the Twos did a number on the Bombers reserves today at Brighton Homes Arena. 68-point win, and JL starred 36 touches, 2 goals, 2. It's a good day for him. It's the same culprits: Archie 29-1, Matho 28-1, Dev Rob 26-1. Fullerton back on the scoreboard with 6 goals, 1. So he's back to pressing his case down in the Twos. They just keep on keeping on. They're equal top of the ladder at the moment. So yeah, can't.
Fullerton crops up with 6 goals. Yeah, good on him.
Healthy percentage, 7-0, 152.5%. Only bettered by the Suns that are undefeated on 163. So good signs for both Queensland teams in the VFL. That, you know, both squads have obviously got enough depth to perform.
You reckon the hotter of the two games next week will be the VFL QClash?
Very possibly.
Do you reckon that'll be the first time in any format that the Lions and the Suns have been first and second?
Almost certainly, yes.
For the table clash, albeit in the VFL.
Yes.
Exciting times. Yeah, the VFL team are doing all right. You kind of got to wonder, like, do some people... I guess you wouldn't want to assume that people sort of considering themselves capped at the VFL level, but I guess, well, Jared Lyons goal in junk time. Quinton Narkle plays for Essendon now. Amazing.
Well, I think he is strictly a VFL listed player.
Quinton Narkle.
Yeah, I don't think he's like pushing for a senior spot or anything. I think he's strictly VFL list. Like we have bloody Wiley Buzzer, who's strictly VFL, has been on an AFL list before. I don't know if he has an AFL game next to his name, but he's certainly been on a couple of lists. Looking at numbers alone, it looked like Darcy had a decent game. 20 touches, 13 kicks, a tackle, 5 marks. So, I mean, the numbers stack up. So if he can just keep plugging away doing that, then it won't be long before he's playing seniors again. Yeah,
it's an interesting, like, I don't tend to look at the whole squad that often, but like, there's quite a few guys in there that you would trust at AFL level for sure. Like going through the lines, like Lohman, Robertson, Archie, Cockatoo, maybe Coleman and Madden are a bit like on the fence. I think Madden's still got a bit to him. Jared Lyons, Jackson Pryor and Tom Fullerton, trust them, I guess. So there's a lot of, I guess it's just depth.
Yeah.
Great. Good to have, particularly when you see some of the absolute hot messes of an injury room at some other clubs.
Yes.
I guarantee that there'd be some other clubs that'd be pretty keen for some of the people in our twos.
100%.
Let's hope that there's no mid-season trading against the will of the slavers or whatever they were kind of going on about. I don't even want to touch that. So
It will happen. It will happen.
So just a quickie before we get into the old nostalgic player segmento. You changing the team going forward?
I don't think so. No. I mean, as we say, if you win, there's no real need to make any changes. Froggy's not going to lose his spot based on that performance, and the only time he would be because Dizzy was coming in. No. I'd even keep it down to the sub. I wouldn't change a thing.
Pretty solid, I got to say.
I mean, there's no, when you're winning by 40 plus points, you're just changing for the sake of changing, unless Rich is, 100% medically cleared to play and we feel like we need him against the Suns, in which case I don't really know who we're taking out. Sharp, I guess. He was the last in, first out policy, but I can't see Richie being back this week with a calf, so I think Fags will probably keep as is.
I'm right there with you. I would love the novelty of just playing Reece Matheson against Gold Coast for like one last hurrah. Would be funny, but not funny enough to do. So yeah, just no change for me.
I wouldn't be surprised if JL was the sub though.
I mean, I will be surprised and annoyed as always.
I know you will be.
It's become a bit of a running theme between the two of us. Just don't get it with that guy. Delist him. Get rid of him. Free up some salary cap for some beautiful Dev, Rob, and Pryor.
Yeah, hard to argue with that.
Just to rub salt in the wound, Sandy Roberts, the whole night, called me Big Jeff Brown. Jeff, did he? Oh, no.
All right, here's one for you. Nostalgic player of the week.
Can you top Todd Manfield?
I don't know that I can top him. I don't think anyone's ever going to top Ben Fixter. I think that is probably the epitome of nostalgic player of the week. But
pretty weird, eh? What do you got?
I've got for you Mr. Troy Selwood.
Oh,
4 Selwoods. Joel, obviously,
one that got away.
The top of the pile. Scott and Adam had, fantastic careers at West Coast, and I think Scott ended up at the Cats for a season or two. And we had Troy, who I don't think it's too disrespectful to say he was probably the least talented of the 4, but still 75 games. And I do remember his farewell game that Vossi gave him. He got absolutely poleaxed on the wing against Richmond. I can't remember who did it to him, but I do remember him leaving the ground much worse than the way he entered it.
Let's just pretend it was Tyrone Vickery.
Oh, sweet.
He's got a funny name. Yeah, look, he's the only one that didn't win a premiership, right?
Yeah, he came in 2005.
Yeah.
So he was there for a lot of garbage.
We had the West Coast one in West Coast, and then you had Joel winning $1 million, and the other fella, Scott, winning one. Yeah, I feel kind of bad, and there's a bit of relativity, so a bit of context. Not to bring this all on myself, but so 2001 grand final, my brother and my parents went to. None of us went to 02, and then my other brother and my dad went to 03. And I drew the shortest of straw and went with my dad to the 2004 grand final.
Oh, no.
So still, I'm the only one in the family not to see a winning flag.
You got to see the Byron Pickett show, though.
Yeah, shut up. Don't make me think about that, even though I brought it up. So, yeah, okay, I can sympathise with him in a very distant, yet I'm probably given far more stick than he is. So,
look, he had a good career, I would say. Troy Selwood, 75 games, 11 goals across those 75 games. But in a period of time where we were struggling, 2005 to 2010, he was a very serviceable player.
I think he probably is just a little bit unlucky more than anything. It's one of those careers you look back at and you're like, you kind of feel bad for the way that it was. It's a bit different to like, say, maybe like Josh Drummond, where you're like, oh man, that guy was so good, but like just his hamstrings were made of like actual string. Yeah, it's a bit of like a with heavy heart. You sort of say Troy Selwood, probably the worst name out of them too.
Troy, yeah.
Unless it ends with McClure, I don't really want to borrow it.
Make sure you follow us on socials. Just search for BL Fancast.
On to the Suns next week. QClash back at the Gabba as well. So a couple of games in a row at the Gabba, which is bloody good to have 2 weeks in a row at home.
Just before you go on, are you going to find a highlight of Troy Selwood getting munched on the wing by Tyrone Vickery?
I'll find him getting munched on the wing, but I don't know that it's going to be by Tyrone Vickery.
I know, just because last week with Todd Banfield, we did find the only YouTube video of Banfield, literally titled "Banfield Shows His Class," and it is just a 2-minute turnover fest where he doesn't actually score a goal or really do anything, and the ball ends up going out the other way before the video cuts. So we always do try to find a little tie-in.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry, let's move on. I just had to get you in the giggles with that.
It was Alex Rance. It was Rance. Yeah.
Oh, ban him for life. Oh, how that could have changed the course of history if he'd been rubbed out for 2 years. I probably wouldn't.
That was the it was a double KO.
Did Rance go too?
Yeah. It was a massive head clash.
Well, good. Rid Rance. Oh, well, I'll look forward to seeing that one up on the Reddit.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be there. Hey, Suns next week. Couple of games in a row at home, back at the Gabba, which is bloody good to have a bit of stability in Brisbane. It'd be nice for the players, and the Suns are coming back from the trip from Perth after their bloody midnight game on Friday.
Yeah, forgot about that. Yeah, I was sucked in. Hopefully, we can make a bit of a habit of just like flaying these teams that have been to West Coast the week before. Carlton the other week.
Yeah.
Gold Coast this week.
They're playing their last couple of weeks in particular. They've been, pretty good. It's hard to know what to take away from a game against West Coast. But, the week before against the D's, they played bloody good footy, and it was a very exciting game to watch. So they're no mugs. You got to go in and take this game seriously. It's not going to be a walkover like it has been in previous years.
I think there's always an element of it to when you got a bit of a local derby. No one's willing to take a backward step. So, if we were not the Brisbane Lions and were in fact actually some other sort of Lions, maybe they would be taking this a bit more lightly than they would. But I think a bit of a home QClash, the Pineapple Grap, I think they'll be up for it. I think it'll be a bit of a hot game. Probably probably the biggest billing one there's been for quite some time.
Yeah, I think...
There might have been one a few years ago where we were both in the 8.
Yeah, potentially. I did say before that I wouldn't make any changes to the 22, but JL loves playing the Sun, so maybe Fags might be tempted to put him in.
Nah.
I must admit I haven't really been keeping an eye on the injury news for the Suns and how far away Tuke Miller is, so maybe he could be back, but if he's not, it would be a shame because, I really like Tuke Miller as a footballer, and I think the QClash is better when he's on the field because it adds that bit of spice. There's that history with him and Zorko, obviously.
Yeah.
And you just want to see the best players out there.
Yeah, do you reckon you'd have Jared Lyon come in for the next 2 games, wouldn't you, to play his 2 old clubs?
Nah, I wouldn't.
Suns and Adelaide?
Nah.
The vindictiveness is oozing out of you. I must admit, I think I said earlier, Raul seems to be in pretty good form. Anderson is being touted as the best midfielder in the competition somehow. I don't know what I read that on, but it was somewhere that said that.
He's playing good footy. He's playing good footy.
They've got a pressure beast in the forward 50. It's Tom Berry.
Yeah.
And King, Lukosius. They got some draft picks. They've got Charlie Ballard miraculously recovered from a broken neck and a stretcher.
Yeah, he's playing. He's putting together a pretty good season. They've got some dangerous players in their squad.
What did you make of the Will Powell? Is he one of their blokes?
Yes, his comments about Van Rooyen.
I thought they were a bit bloody rich, given that Ballard elbowed a dude in the head and got off on tribunal about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Far greater.
Yeah.
Potential to cause injury in that one.
Yeah. I think when you see your teammate get stretched off in a neck brace, then you probably just want to have your teammates back, and I think that's probably all that was going through his head at the time when he said what he said. But I think if he had his time again, he probably wouldn't have.
Good soundbite though, isn't it? He sounds like a right little shitbag.
Yeah, I think he probably thought he was doing the right thing without actually thinking too much about the words that were coming out of his face.
There were some pretty odd media moments last week, I got to say. The Adam Chera one was hilarious.
Yeah, he got stitched up there, though.
Wheeling him out in front is like the only guy that's played a good game. We had some other funny ones as well. Like our mate Hoyne said that like Dunkley's game wasn't actually very good.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about Daniel Hoyne.
Oh god, it's just funny. It's laughable. There's no context. You need context for these stats. It doesn't work otherwise.
Like the show? Make sure to follow and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms.
A little question from mine. I didn't send it through to you. I should have done. What are your thoughts? There's a lot of young players, first year, second year players, having quite a bit of an impact in the competition, particularly in like a ball winning sense. Not necessarily the tolls. We all know that they're going to take a bit of time. But do you reckon that there's anything in these young players doing their kind of later development years with things like the 666 rule, the stand rule, some of the modifications to marking contests and things like that, that's the reason why you've got, you know, Ashcroft coming in making a pretty big impact, Dacos and Sneasel, Sheasel. You know, there's a lot of pretty good first year players, almost I reckon in an unparalleled or unprecedented sense. What do you reckon?
I think, it comes down to where you're playing these players as well. I mean, Sheasel and Nick Dacos are more playing off the half back. Dacos plays a little bit more inside than Sheasel does, and Nick Dacos uses the ball significantly better than Sheasel. So I think just by positioning alone, they're due to get more of the footy and their numbers. And, you know, if you don't really... I'm not going to say if you don't know football. If your way of analysing footy is just to look at numbers and go, oh, wow, he's had 30 plus touches, he must be good at football, then, yeah, I guess you're probably thinking, well, yeah, Sheasel's a shoo-in for the rising star, but, you know, how many centre bounces has the kid gone to? And maybe he has gone to a handful, maybe he's gone to none. I don't rightly know. But you look at Ashcroft, who's getting mid-20s average disposal, but he's playing a lot of inside ball, and the way he's using it, the context in which he's using the ball as well, I would much rather that than a prolific ball winner.
Yeah, I must admit I'm pretty on the fence with. I know it'll be probably unpopular, but with Nick Dacos, I get there's a lot of ball movement there, and I get there's a lot of possessions, but I don't see the impact of it that seemingly everyone else in the entire footy landscape do. You know. I think it's a pretty easy scenario when you're the fourth man in a midfield three, when you're essentially unmarked. He's clean hands. He's got clean hands. He can run. He's really fit. But I called it before we played him, put some body on him, and teams have started doing that, and I don't think they did that today. He got 41.
Yeah.
But I think it was when Keezy went and did a job on him, and he had something like 24 disposals. 11 were kickouts. I think he had 7 that were kicked off the ground.
Wow.
And it was sort of like, yeah, so he actually had 8 touches of the footy. And I think stats in footy need, like, the amount of hospital balls he gives to other people is kind of odd. You know, he'll dish the ball off. It'll count as an efficient disposal. So he'll get a stat for that. He'll get a tick for the percentage. But it goes to someone else and then they get tackled straight away. I don't know. I think I can't understand how he's so difficult to tag, because they've talked about it. Oh, he's so hard to tag because you tag him and then he goes up to the stoppage and then the player doesn't know where to go with him. Just go, all right, I'm the high half forward. I'm going to tag him. And if he goes into the midfield, you take him. How is it that hard?
I think a lot of it comes down to the team he's playing in. I think Collingwood's system allows him to play probably the best footy that he can. I you know, as much as I'm sick of hearing about the kid, he's bloody good at footy, and he does use the ball well more often than not. Yeah, he's not probably as hard as some football players out there as a Joel Selwood or something. He hasn't got that mongrel about him, and we've seen him shirk a couple of contests here and there, but he's certainly and they trust him to use the ball and kick the ball out, and they'll find him more often than not when they can, because they know he'll use it and hit a target. So there is a degree of, yes, he's playing in the biggest club in the country. He's got a very famous last name, so that all just adds to this is going to, people are going to click on this article if I use the word Nick Dacos. I mean, people are going to talk about it, and there is an element of that. But, everything aside, I think he's a decent footballer for sure.
Another question: Why didn't Josh Dacos wear the 35?
I think he probably did in his first year. That was Collingwood's thing. If the first pick that Collingwood gets inherits the number 35, and then they surrender that number the next year when they do the next first pick. But Nick Dacos had just said, I want to keep it, so he did.
That sort of shows the kind of individual you are.
Yeah, there was something a bit not nice about it, but I suppose if anyone's going to be like, hey, I'm going to break this tradition, it's going to be the son of the man that wore the number back in the day.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's kind of a bit like the Port Adelaide captain's always wearing number 1, I guess. Where I wouldn't want to break tradition, but that said, you and I tend to be traditional in different avenues. Do you think he's going to win the Brownlow?
I think at this stage he'd be top 3. I think I'd have Marcus Bontempelli in front of him at the moment. Now there's the guy that is more often than not in the middle of the ground, uses his big body, uses the ball well, leads like a fantastic captain, affects the scoreboard. So that's now there's something you want in a footballer in every sense of the word.
I think it'll be a bit of a blight on the game if Bontempelli doesn't win a Brownlow and Dacos does.
Yeah, for sure.
Particularly in this season. Like, I think as far as it's hard to say. It's hard to say whether Collingwood are as good without Dacos. I mean, they seem to think that if he gets tagged, it doesn't matter. So, don't know. I guess maybe I'm just a bit of a...
I think the footy landscape is just caught in this echo chamber of how good is Nick Dacos, how good is Nick Dacos, how good is Nick Dacos. And so it just sort of perpetuates that how good is Nick Dacos narrative, and he doesn't do anything to necessarily hurt it most weeks.
He's a bloody robot. I think I saw him in it was like an interview with him and Buckley, and Buckley's like, I love seeing your emotion on the field. It's like, yes, I do like showing our emotions humanly. Like, the dude's a robot. He's an absolute robot. But maybe that's what we want in our footy peoples is.
Maybe, and I guess he's a marketer's dream. Like, there'd be kids out there that idolize him. He's reasonably good-looking fella. He's always seems shiny and got good skin. The perfect haircut. So he's ticking a lot of boxes.
Call it the perfect haircut. You could definitely set a watch to it.
Yes.
But I don't like the weird, Braden Maynard, who gets his second weekly mention, the Braden Maynardness of the back of it. But I don't know. I think I'm just an old man now, so
no, I get it.
These young whippersnappers coming in and reinventing the position.
It'd be interesting to see how he would thrive in another team system. Like, I do think the way that Collingwood play their footy allows Nick Dacos to play as well as he does. So chuck him at the West Coast Eagles for a week, see what happens. Who knows? Maybe he's just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
Or maybe he struggles because he hasn't got that team around him that is, utilising him the way that he was sort of born to be utilised.
I don't know. I'm just sick of it. Collingwood suck. And they get all the beautiful media time.
Well, and they always have, and they probably always will, rightly or wrongly. I mean, they get scrutinised heavier than anyone else as well. You gotta remember, I suppose.
I mean, a bit. Like, they get like softball scrutinised. It'll be like, oh, Jordan De Goey went to Bali, and it's like, yeah, but he came back. So apparently, we found the Lions are learning to win in different ways. Is the AFL's thing that they figured out about us this week.
And I think there's a degree of truth to that as well. It wasn't as, it certainly wasn't as clear-cut as North Melbourne game, and it was very different to last week's game against Carlton, where we, put in a number of measures to stop their game going ahead, but also excel in our game. I think we had so many of our strengths being tried to taken away from us that we just had to grind out a win. So there's a degree of truth to that we found a different way to win, and it was a 7-goal win in the end as well. So I think if you can keep doing that, then the signs are good.
Beautiful stuff.
But I do want to leave you on one thing. You little beauty!